Hey, what's up everyone? My name's Rob Kleifield. Welcome to my corner of the end zone. This is the start of a summer video series that I hope gives all of you a little bit more insight into my football fandom and knowledge. Before jumping into this week's episode, it feels appropriate to provide a little bit of context as to who I am and why you'll want to tune in to Rob K's Corner of the End Zone every Monday for at least the next 8 weeks. I'm currently a sports journalism master's student at Arizona State University, but my allegiance to the Sun Devils doesn't stretch very far if you can't tell already. That's because I grew up rooting for the team down south and graduated from the University of Arizona last spring, where I also played inside linebacker on the football team during the 2015-16 season under head coach Rich Rodriguez and defensive coordinator Jeff Castile. Honestly, a few years ago, my expectations were still to be playing ball right now. I always pictured myself evolving into a big-time college linebacker and paving my way to the NFL. I know, some lofty dreams, but I've always prided myself on dreaming big, and I still do, except now my playing field is a little bit different. I've done my best to ferociously attack the next phase of my life over these last few years. I've always had a passion for writing, and now, as a journalist, I'm able to combine arguably my two favorite things in this world, sports and storytelling. In terms of what you can expect from my weekly episodes, just know this. You'll learn a lot about my favorite players, moments, trends, coaches, teams, and memories, and why there's always more to the game of football than meets the eye. At some point, I'll likely bring on guests too, whether it be friends, colleagues, former teammates, or people that I've gotten to know in the industry. Again, my main goal is to help you get to know me and better understand my love for the greatest sport on earth. Let's get after it. This week I'm diving into the realm of the National Football League's all-time clutchest passers, so allow me to introduce you to my Mount Rushmore of clutch quarterbacks. But before revealing 4 players I feel fit the bill of pro football's best late-game signal callers, I think it's necessary to highlight a few mental and physical attributes that are generally present in the makeup of the league quarterback. Perseverance, intelligence, toughness, and confidence. The latter two are exemplified perfectly by the player coming in at my number 4 spot. One of the longest tenured quarterbacks who at the time of his retirement walked away from the game as the leader of most major statistical passing categories. Good old Brett Favre. Favre's knack for thrills naturally steered him toward comeback opportunities, and for the most part, his backyard style of play, which has really only been imitated recently by Patrick Mahomes, reaped great rewards. Favre's improbable 40-yard slingshot to the back of the end zone, hauled in by Vikings receiver Greg Lewis against the San Francisco 49ers in 2009, still stands as one of my favorite plays in NFL history, largely because it all felt so unlikely. Favre made a living off making the impossible possible though, which made even the late stages of his 20-year run fun to watch. He was certainly more mistake-prone in the 2000s than he was during the peak of his career, which was capitalized by 3 consecutive 35-plus touchdown campaigns, earning Favre 3 straight MVP awards from 1995 to 1997. Still, when his hair turned gray and his uniforms changed, he brought a feverish mentality to the huddle that was rarely replicated. Favre gave fans a little bit, check that, a lot of the best of both worlds. He'd either pull off the unthinkable and make opponents look silly, or sometimes the same aggressiveness and gunslinging mentality that saved the day would prove to be costly. I guess that's the paradox of Brett Favre though, and his clutch, or not, antics that make him somewhat of a polarizing quarterback. Overall though, I think Favre's arm strength and ability to launch balls from any platform typically set him up for late game success. More so than other challengers at least. The third clutchest quarterback in NFL history, in my opinion, happens to be a player I never actually had the privilege of watching, but whose tale has been compared to the likes of folklore hero Paul Bunyan by the late great sports writer Frank DeFord. The only difference? This guy's legend was real. So strap in as we travel back in time to revisit the profound greatness of John Constantine Unitas. Johnny U's ability to will his Baltimore Colt teammates to victory was second to none during an era that's remembered as the blossoming of professional football. Unitas made his mark as a passer well before teams regularly stretched the field, or leaned heavily on their quarterbacks to make precise, split-second decisions. Most impressively, he played with a poise and a commanding spirit that elevated the performance of each and every person in Baltimore's offensive huddle, a characteristic that may be common in today's NFL, but was almost entirely absent half a century ago. Unitas called his own plays. He developed checks at the line of scrimmage with some of his most reliable teammates, another facet of today's game that was virtually non-existent back then. He also always, and I mean always, seemed to be one step ahead of the opposing defense. Unitas' late-game heroics were beautifully displayed at Yankee Stadium in what's often referred to as the greatest game ever played, the 1958 NFL Championship between the underdog Colts and the New York Giants. The facts are simple. Baltimore prevailed in the very first NFL playoff game to conclude in sudden death overtime. just moments after Unitas led the Colts offensive unit on a game-tying drive with under 2 minutes left in regulation. There's more to the story though, and Hall of Fame safety Emlyn Tunnell, who suffered at the hands of Unitas on that fateful December day, tells it best. Everything we expected him to do, and what you absolutely believed he would do, he didn't do, Tunnell said. Perhaps the craziest and least known fact about Unitas' remarkable journey to stardom and relative immortality was its starting point. The University of Louisville product never played a down for the Pittsburgh Steelers, who drafted him in the 9th round of the 1955 NFL Draft. In fact, he was never awarded even the opportunity to play in one of Pittsburgh's preseason exhibition games. Unitas was practically outcasted by a coaching staff and ownership group who failed to identify traits and habits like a picturesque follow-through and steadiness in the pocket no matter how many men were after him like rabid animals that eventually acted as catalysts for the gangly 6'1", 195-pound quarterback's evolution into pro football's original and prototypical field general. Checking in at number 2 is Colts and Broncos legend and 5-time NFL Most Valuable Player Award winner Peyton Manning, the king of the audible. Perhaps my number 2 spot is a disservice to the Sheriff, since he sits comfortably atop the all-time total fourth-quarter comeback and game-winning drive charts. But it's not meant to be a knock on Peyton. My lone criticism of Manning is that he failed to collect the necessary amount of team hardware to be considered the best overall option behind center when a game comes down to the wire. Lombardi trophies aside, however, Manning was almost always there to deliver the goods in crunch time, and they almost always started at the line of scrimmage. Manning wasn't the first Colt to call his own plays from the huddle or resurrect his team from obscurity back into the good graces of fans, teammates, and coaches. He wasn't the first Colts quarterback to bail out his defense or instill a feeling of infinite possibility among his peers. But he did do things that were often overlooked or went unnoticed that contributed directly to the ascension of his offense and their efforts to get into the end zone. He was a leader, a strategist, tactician, and executioner in every sense of the word. Manning's ability to decipher coverages by alignment and check pre-existing play calls before the snap proved to be his greatest asset, in my eyes, and it often allowed the former number 1 overall pick to screw with defenses more and more as games progressed. Essentially, Manning performed at peak efficiency in the final quarter of action, a dream for any offense, trailing or not. And let's not forget Manning's second act, a 4-year stint in Denver upon returning from a career-threatening neck injury that produced a similar amount of franchise success that culminated over 13 seasons in Indianapolis. In other words, Manning's greatest effect may have been the inspiration and focus he provided his teammates. Rounding out my Mount Rushmore of the clutchest quarterbacks in NFL history in my mind, if you haven't guessed already, is Mr. Thomas Edward Patrick Brady, a.k.a. the Comeback Kid. Brady's widely viewed to be the greatest player of all time, so it shouldn't come as much of a surprise that he also consistently delivered in game's most crucial moments during his 20-year run with the New England Patriots. Even more impressive, though, than his countless comebacks and furious rallies, not to mention his 219 career victories, a staggering 33 more than Favre, who's ranked second on the all-time wins list, is Brady's resiliency in the face of impending defeat. The 6-time Super Bowl champ and 4-time Super Bowl MVP simply never wavers when the odds look anything but in his favor. The Michigan man possesses an unteachable confidence and rarely looks flustered in situations that often force other quarterbacks to fold under pressure. In fact, I'd argue that Brady performs better in the clutch, with an outcome at stake and the down and distance pitted against him, than at any other stage of the game, and I'm certain that numerous NFL teams would attest to that. Like Johnny U ushering in a new era of pro football in the late 50s throughout the 60s and into the 70s, Brady's 2 decades worth of dominance beginning near the turn of the century has made the professional ranks more exciting, more suspenseful, although perhaps just a bit more predictable too, because he's so damn hard to beat. But that's just another testimony too in the reality of Tom's greatness and his unflappable mindset on 3rd and long, trailing by 4 or more in the waning moments on any given Sunday. He's the clutchest of all time in my book, and his feats, which aren't finished yet, will surely prove challenging to topple. So there you have it, my Mount Rushmore of clutch quarterbacks. 4 distinguished passers with seemingly endless lists of accolades and honors. 4 players with superb arm talent, stats that pop off the page, and one shared defining trait: the killer instinct to win, no matter the odds stacked against them. Until next week's episode, everyone, thanks for tuning in to Rob K's Corner of the End Zone. I appreciate all your support, all your interest, and any feedback. Stick around to see how we might be able to connect.